Hello, everybody. Sorry we're a little bit late tonight, but being the absolute stickler for professionalism that I am, I wasn't going to start the show until I had a hot drink. So I literally was waiting for the kettle to boil before we started tonight's show. So Mr. Pollard can't be with us tonight because he's writing an article. So we have in his place a very, very special guest from all the way across the Atlantic. It's only Mike Reeves. Hello, Mike. How are you?
Hi, guys. Hello, everybody. Jonathan, good to see you as always. Hello from sunny Phoenix, Arizona.
I was going to say we're feeling rather jealous of the fact that you're able to sit outside in the t-shirt
and shorts, mind you.
Oh, sweet! Don't you just hate him? How are things with you, Michael?
Everything's great. Can't complain about anything right now. It's life is good, business is good, family's all home. Well, I guess one thing that would be a downer is my son is now in quarantine for a few days as he got exposed at school, but no symptoms or anything, and he's good. So he's actually in the house. The reason I'm outside, he's in the house doing a math test, and my wife is working in our office. So you get balmy, sunny outside with me today.
Well, that sounds pretty good. I like to sit outside. Usually on a Friday afternoon. I've got one of those kind of chimenea things, like those shaped fluted outdoor chimneys.
Yeah.
And you just chuck wood on it, and I sit out there and I read a book or a magazine, and I'm freezing my bits off. But it's just lovely to be out there and just absolutely splendid. Now, Mike, we're going to tackle a couple of things tonight, some of which I haven't even told you about, so they're going to come as a complete surprise.
Fantastic.
No, I do like to love surprise. But let's talk about some of the phase hanger stuff you are working on at the moment. And what we're going to do is we'll just bring up some pictures here, and you can tell our good viewers about what goodies you have in the pipeline. So let's kick off with the first one. Let us know what this is, like a quiz now. Let us know what this is and the scale. So what have we got here?
Those are our recently released Great Wall Hobby F15 corrected seamless intakes. They were designed by our friend, and I'm sure you know him as well, Jens Brandl, printed by our other good friend, Mr. Tim Perry, and sent to me for sale here at Phase Hanger. There's two different versions, and basically what it is, just to kind of give it in a nutshell, the Great Wall kits suffer from very, very underscale, narrow intake openings on it, and it's very noticeable. I'm an F15 guy, and so Jens and I have been kind of tootling with this for the last couple of years, and he came up with the design on CAD, and so what you see here are the basic components of the 229 engine, which is the later with that spike instead of the dome on that fan section. I just started selling them about maybe 3 weeks ago, and they're selling like gangbusters. I also have the F100 early one, which has just the dome fan section center. So these are currently available as part numbers 48080 for the early F100, and this is 48081 with the 229 fans. There's the dome one right there, as a matter of fact, the early. They're selling like hotcakes, and I just actually redesigned the instructions. So those, I actually sent some out sans instructions because I wasn't happy with the way they came out. So I've emailed the people that I sent them to copies. So yeah, I'm really happy with these. I think they came out really, really, really beautiful, and they're not hard to install, as you can see.
And these are like I say, these are 48. They will. Is this for their Strike Eagle, or is this for the for the standard fighter variants?
Both.
Right. Okay.
They can be used on any version that Great Wall has come out. The only thing you have to pay attention to is the kit that you're building. You got to make sure what engine it has in it. Mm-hmm. Most of the single seaters are going to have the early F100 The C's and D's are going to have the early F100 motors, whereas the Strike Eagles and the Israeli version are all going to have the later with the spike.
Mm. And does casting something like that intake trunking? What are the kind of technical hurdles you have to get over for casting something like that?
Really, wall thickness is the main thing, because especially with the tube section, it's pretty long. So we had to make sure that it was within tolerances, that it was even castable, because when it's thin, a lot of times what will happen is it will wobble in the mold and you'll get a thin wall and a really thick wall, which I've run across on other things when I was learning how to do this. Also, you can't really tell in the pictures, but the two taller gray tubes, which are the front sections, we had to kind of put a scab plate on either side, if you will, as the prints that we got, the walls were too thin. I couldn't even cast them. So all I did on those when I installed mine was take a little disc sander and sanded them off, or down to a good thickness, and they dropped right in.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And what other goodies have you got in the range at the moment for the F-15s?
I've got the seamless gun fairing, also for the Great Wall kit, which I did not send a picture of to you because I forgot about it, frankly. I've got drop tanks, sets of 1, 2, and 3 drop tanks for any F-15 and 48 scale. They're really the only correct dimensionally drop tanks out there. And they have 2 versions as well. The standard tank, which is kind of that pointy tail and nose. And we also have the War Reserve material, which has the cut-off back end, shorter. It's the same gallon weight and gallon weight. That made no sense. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Same volume.
Volume,
yeah. Standard 600-gallon tank, but they don't have that tail cone on them, and they have some raised riveting on the back, which is kind of cool. I've also got pylons for the CD version with the old LAU rails as well as the new LAU rails, or newer, so the 114s and the 128 rails. And then we just released the Strike Eagle version of pylons. So.
We've got some pictures of some pylons here that you sent us this afternoon. Talk us through what we're looking at here then.
Those right there are 32nd scale Super Hornet pylons. You guys may remember, in fact, I think one of your very first shows as IMC, you brought up my 48 scale version. These are for the 32nd scale Revell and Trumpeter kits. Really happy with them. They're not for sale yet. They will be fairly soon. I'm kind of holding off on releasing new stuff because honestly, I have an avalanche of orders out there for people that have paid for things that I need to get out to them. So this will be in the next grouping. Really happy with the detail on them.
Did these arrive with you as single piece 3D printed castings?
Yes.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, that technology has really revolutionized
it certainly
this
has.
aspect of the hobby, hasn't it?
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, there's still most of the 3D printing things that are of this nature. There's still a little bit of cleanup that has to be done on them. Once in a while you get the couple little printing ridges, which I have to sand off and clean up. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward.
And I'm looking at some of that recessed detail. What challenges do those represent in terms of undercuts and things for creating the molds and pulling the resin out of the molds?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
What those undercuts do, especially where you see the center of the smaller pylons, the big ones not so much because they're pretty hollow in there. But those smaller outboard ones and the center line create unique challenges because of those undercuts. And honestly, they eat rubber.
I was going to say, how many pulls do you get from an average mold?
On an average mold, not one of these, I can get anywhere normally 25 to 30 pulls per mold. Like those intakes, they're pretty smooth and easy to pull. So I can get quite a bit out of those until the rubber just starts to dry up, and never have a tearing issue. But with these guys, I'll be lucky to get 10. Yeah. And these come in two different versions. As you can see in this photo, were those 2 bolts or 4 bolts on the side of the pylon. That's one version, and then the other one has a plate over it, which they thought was going to help with aerodynamics, but it turns out they just rip off most of the time.
I think what you've illustrated there is that for all of modelers all the time wanting to have more detail comes at a price, and that price is it slows down your production processes, but because you're having to create more molds to be able to mold this detail, that does have to be reflected in the end price as well, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I have to consider, the time, the cost of the material, and naturally the rubber for the molds is the most expensive part of what I do. I mean, if I buy 2 gallons, it's going to cost me, basically $300, and 2 gallons of rubber does not go far. I'm up to right now, I think I buy 7 gallons at a time. So it's an expensive process and time consuming, but it's worth it. I mean, when you get people showing, they build the models, they use my parts, or any resin company, I'll throw anybody out there that does this, because it's not easy. It's not something you learn overnight, and but it is so rewarding at the end game.
We've got some other pylons here as well. What are we looking at here, Mike?
Those are 1/48 scale A7D Corsair 2.
Lovely.
Now we have 2 different versions available. I only sent you pictures of the D because, frankly, I ran out of time. We had an appointment this morning that I forgot these, to be honest with you.
No, you're fine.
So these are the D model. And they are very similar, but also quite different than the E model. When you look at the opening where the bomb rack goes, which is, by the way, a separate 3D printed part. I'm not sure if I sent you pictures with them. So unlike the F-18 pylons, where you saw the bomb rack was basically part of the 3D part, in this case, they're 3D printed, and you can paint them outside the pylon, and they'll just slot into the pylon. We just found that trying to pull those in RTV was more difficult and with more breakage than it was to just have them separate and printed. But I'm really impressed.
I say we've got 3 pylons in this photograph. I take it these are all for the A7 Corsair 2.
Yes, and the set comes with 6. I only photographed 3 because I didn't get all 6 out of the container. But I just wanted to give you an idea.
Yeah.
So you get 2 of each, basically, for the 3 wing stations.
We will come back to the Corsair after this section, because I want to get to the bottom of this story about the Aurora A7 being consumed into the monogram range, because we'll talk about this afterwards. We'll talk about it now. We've got some boxes and interior bits and pieces here for an helicopter.
Indeed. Also not available yet. These are and this is something that I'm delving into for the first time. These are for the 1/35th scale Kitty Hawk SH-60F. These were kindly scratch built out of styrene by my very good friend and master pattern maker that's helped me from the early days of 2 Mics. His name is Gabe Pincelli. He's a former Navy aviator, F-18, T-45 pilot. Loves Spitfires, by the way, just so you know. That's how I pay him, is with Spitfires. But yeah, these are 100% styrene scratch built to detail up the cabin of the Kitty Hawk SH-60F. He's going to send me some photos, which I will pass on to you if you'd like, of the parts installed in the raw, if you will. He's also working on the sonobuoy decoy deployer thing. I don't know what it is. I know nothing about helicopters. But I thought this stuff was really cool.
Yes, we got a comment here from Dave Fleming who says, "Hi guys, the interesting shopping channel." Dave,
watch it, Dave.
I say Dave Fleming will be coming onto the show this year, where he also will then experience the brickbats and sarcasm of the people in the comment section. So my message to Dave is: be careful what you sow, Dave. But these do look fabulous. I mean, I'm believe it or not, Mike. I mean, I've over the years I've accumulated an extraordinary amount of reference on the A7, and it's become an aeroplane that's interested me simply because I have accumulated an extraordinary amount of reference on it. But yeah, when you actually start looking at the aeroplane, it's gorgeous, isn't it? I mean, so many color schemes, so many things you can do with it, and it's surprising how few truly accurate kits there are out there of the A7, because so many of them fluff up something, whether it's the intake, the canopy, and like I say, we will come back to that Aurora kit in the second half of the show. Finally, for tonight, we have some what can best be described as pointy things.
These are also coming soon to tag along with those 32nd scale Super Hornet pylons. These are the 32nd scale Super Hornet drop tanks. The one, you see the main tank body, which is universal for both. The nose cone on the right is the standard tank, and the one on the left is the centerline only carried tank that has the IRST sensor in it. So I thought that was pretty cool, and that you could see all the screws and things that are required to probably pull that thing in and out of that nose cone when needed. And the I guess it's a cooling vent or something to make sure it doesn't heat up. I don't know. But these are pretty fabulous. And we finally started adding our logo to our.
I noticed that. That's rather dandy.
Yeah. So,
and I mean, just that is just phenomenal. That detail.
Yeah, and surprisingly, it doesn't break off when I pull it.
I mean, again, this is where 3D printing is taking us now in terms of just the ability to go right down to ridiculous levels of detail.
For sure.
Yeah.
And now that I've picked up a 3D printer myself, and I'm slowly muddling my way through CAD, so I'm not relying on it all, other people all the time for this kind of stuff, which, Rich Van Zant, my buddy Gabe, and my other friend John Chung, who did all my F-14 stuff, have been very generous in assisting and helping this business grow. And I would be remiss if I did not thank them publicly for that. But I've made a square and I've made a circle, so I'm well on my way to being able to, put a pylon like that together next week probably. So,
well, let's put it this way. The Tyrannosaurus Rex in Jurassic Park started out as a square and a circle originally,
right?
And it evolved, and it became something else. Now, this I'm going to put you on the spot with this, and that is a little bit of controversy over the week is whether 3D printed parts constitute scratch building. You see, became a bit of an emotive topic. Now,
I saw
most unusual for modelers, that and I'm of the opinion. I'm of the opinion that if you are creating it from nothing, so if you're sat, it doesn't matter what device, what the device is. If you are sat at a computer keyboard, or if you're in a workshop, you are starting out with nothing, and you carve a shape or you design a shape within software. Then you send it off to be printed, or indeed, let's just say you design a gun barrel, and then you send that data through to a lathe or a milling machine, which will then turn it in brass or whatever. because you have started out from absolutely nothing, to me, that still constitutes scratch building. And especially if you are, Ian Ogilvy is doing this at the moment. He's building a 32nd scale aircraft, and he's 3D printing it. So he's creating it, and he's 3D printing it, and he's assembling it. As far as I'm concerned, that is still scratch building. But some people don't think so. Mr. Reeves, what is your opinion on the matter?
I look at it this way, and by the way, I've seen Ian's work that he's doing, and it's crazy. And it's big. I think anytime, I don't care if you start with a piece of styrene, a piece of balsa wood, or an electron in a computer. If you can make something out of that, you're still using your hands, you're still using your eyes, and you're still using your mind. That's scratch building. And in many cases, it's a one-off. Most of these guys that are doing it for themselves, I saw the comment about if I print a 3D print a chair, is that scratch building? Absolutely. The materials are just different, and the mindset is different. Everything evolves through this hobby and through many things. An architect designs a building in CAD. That's scratch building a building, as far as I'm concerned. It takes someone to put it together, but it all started with a guy and a keyboard. So I am 100% thoroughly of the opinion it is scratch building.
I mean, obviously, if somebody goes onto one of these kind of places where there are designs that you can download and then print, that's not scratch building. That's no more scratch building than going out. Essentially, you are importing a product in that somebody else that is somebody else's expertise, design expertise, and whatever. So to download a file for, say, an oil drum and then print it out, well, that's no different from going out and buying a resin oil drum,
right?
You see. But if you sat there and you've gone outside, you've got an oil drum, you've measured it and you designed it and you've finessed it, and then you've sent it through to the printer, and and like I say, you have created it yourself. You have created it from nothing using your skills and abilities. That's scratch building. Now, I think the other thing that can I say this? So I'm just looking at the gallery here. They're all standing there like this going, no, don't say it, don't say it. No. I think one of the things that always gets me is because I came in at the pretty much the kind of the early dawn of desktop publishing and computer illustration and everything. Is I've seen it over the years evolve, and it's just this idea that because it's done on a computer, press button that says make decal sheet,
right?
Doesn't work that way. And you see it with LiDAR. Is the amount of misconceptions out there about what LiDAR does when manufacturers go out and they LiDAR scan a subject. It's amazing how when LiDAR first came to the modeling public's attention, the next day everybody on AN Modeling Forum was an expert on LiDAR.
Right.
You see? And it's this idea that you just go out, you scan a subject, and then you take the data back into the office and you press the button that says make kit.
Right.
And it doesn't work that way. And I think there is a certain there is a schism, there is a divide in this between people who understand and use the technology and people who don't. And I sometimes think that it's the people who don't understand or use the technology bring a lot of misconceptions and preconceptions that think that, well, there's no skill involved in this.
Right.
No, there is a lot of skill involved. You'll know this because, as you say, you're at the moment at the early stages of learning how to use CAD/CAM, and 3D design. As you say, you've done a circle and a square. If it's that easy, everybody would be doing it.
Yep. I made a comment, and I can't see the comments, so if I have
all right, sorry.
Said hi to everybody that is on.
Yeah.
I want to just say a shout out, and if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. Those are the same people that I feel question why so and so came out with a Spitfire kit when there's oodles of them. They don't understand the marketing and the need to generate income. And you guys have talked about this ad nauseum. There's a reason why Edward can come out with a crop duster. It's because they've sold a gajillion 109s and, Spitfires and now Mustangs, 190s. That's how they can do that kind of cool stuff that is a little bit off the wall. And I think it's the same thing with the 3D printing. I was talking to Tim Monder about this at the Wiltshire Model Club on Thursday nights. They do a live thing, and I join in once in a while. And I said the 3D printer is going to become the 20s, the decade of the 2020s pet rock. I think people are going to go out and buy it. They're going to think that it's press the button and here we go. And they're not going to realize all the work involved to get it to work for something they want. I printed a baby Yoda or whatever his name is. I paid for it. Yeah. But I didn't scratch build it. Like you said, I paid $20 for it, downloaded it, and printed it just to see how it came out.
Well, Tim Cavalier raises this point, which we covered a few minutes ago. He says, well, what if you're using somebody else's 3D part versus designing and printing yourself? Well, the simple answer there is, if you're using somebody else's part, it's no different to actually going out and buying another product.
Yep.
But if you are creating it from your own, from up here and with these, that's scratch building. And it doesn't matter whether you're using a MacBook or whether you're using a lathe or you're using a scalpel and a file. It is that origination. You see, it's the difference between if you sit down and create a piece of music, you've created a piece of music. If all you sit down and do is record a cover version of somebody else's song, you've created something, but it's a cover version, and it's a copy. And this is what it is with 3D printing. Is if somebody says, "I scratch built that," well, did you design and create it yourself? No, I downloaded it from a website. You didn't scratch build it then.
No, your hands. The only thing they did was glue it together if it was required.
Except which makes it no different from any other tangible product or accessory you go out and buy. And like I say, Adam Tooby, the box artist who does all the box art for Airfix, he got this very early on when he started doing the illustrations, because people were very resistant to it and almost quite literally saying, you need to have a proper artist. Well, what is Adam if not a proper artist?
Right.
He is creating the actual models in 3D that he's using for his illustration. But when you actually look at his drawings, when you look at his illustrations and you look at all the scuffs and the scratches and the exhaust stains and the paint chips and the discoloration, none of that is software. Trust me, there is nothing in Photoshop that you can go to a filter that says weather aeroplane. He has gone in there. Yeah, exactly. He has gone in there and he has meticulously done all that. And whether or not he's done it with a paintbrush, with an airbrush, or, and again, you get people who, I saw this the other day that somebody said that airbrushing isn't real modeling. There's no skill in airbrushing.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, exactly. And Drew actually made a very good point about this the other day. Drew Manton.
We're talking about the Drew Manton.
Yeah, the Drew Manton. No, not the Drew Manton, just a Drew Manton. There are about 100 clones out there. He made a very good point, which I am going to shamelessly steal off of him because I've got an op-ed to write for Model Aircraft magazine. And I'm going to quote from him because, I'm absolutely going to, take this from him and not credit him at all whatsoever. He says, people hate change, especially if they feel isolated from it. It threatens them. They feel like they're being left behind.
Absolutely.
That don't tell him I said this, right? This is between you and me. That is a brilliant piece of insight. That's a brilliant piece of incisiveness.
I agree.
That cuts through everything to that whole kind of human condition thing.
Well, and I would circle the wagon right back to where you said someone said airbrushing isn't hard. That's somebody that either has never tried it or has tried it and failed miserably, and that's now their excuse that I use a paintbrush or the dreaded hairy stick, which
that's a word banned on this channel, by the way.
It is now for sure.
Yeah, it is now for
especially
sure.
when an American says it. To me, that just rings out either some sort of, I don't know, jealousy, or they're afraid of that change because they don't know how to accept it.
I'll tell you something. Weird analogy time, but you know me, I like my weird analogies. It's like people who think that playing a bass guitar is easy. You see, all you got to do is just go dum 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 dum. On a fundamental level, yes, you see. But when you actually explore playing the bass and you look at the relationship between the bass player and what the drummer is playing, and how the bass interacts with the bass pedal and the fills and all the other things, the patterns and everything, and and here I would say, if you think bass playing is easy, go away and listen to, surprise, surprise, Geddy Lee. Go away and listen to Steve Harris. Go away and listen to John Entwistle, or oh, for goodness me, the chap from Yes. You listen to all these great bass players, Chris Squires. Go and listen to them, and then come back and then play me some of that.
Yeah, the rest in peace, but the great Cliff Burton from Metallica. I mean, when you look at the revolutionary, and I'll say this, I've always heard that the bass player is actually the backbone of the band.
Yeah, it is.
Because he's the one that carries the tempo, even more so in some ways than the drummer, because the drummer can adjust to the bass player, but the bass player has a hard time going the other way.
If a bass player does something that doesn't fit, you'll hear it. You see, but like I say, it's that thing that people who don't play the bass think that playing the bass is easy.
Right.
Trust me, it's not. It is a science. There is a science to it. And it's the science of listening to the music and actually figuring how the bass actually slots in there and moves the music forward. Anyway, welcome to Prog Rock Night with myself and Mike Reeves. Now, but like I say, it's to me, it's scratch building.
Agreed, 1,000%.
And I spoke to Drew about this, and scratch building. So I'm going to write that up as an op-ed just to stir things up a bit, but.
Oh, by the way, thank you for the mention in your last editorial.
Well, it was genuine. It was just nice, seeing somebody go out of their comfort zone and build things that they don't usually build. And I'd say this to everybody tonight. And in fact, we're going to give a shout out now to everybody who's watching. So let's going to have to draw. Let me have a drink here.
I don't even know how many people we have.
We've got about 50 people watching at the moment.
Nice.
Absolutely. So here we go. We're going to say a big thank you to Douglas Hunter, John Patrick Huston, Dave Swindle, Pavel Krupovich, Paul Milligan, Greg Woodbridge, Rob Monfort, Andy Brennan, Ivan Jensen Taylor, Darren McGuinness, Steve Johnson, Juan Francisco Molinido, Anthony Bird, Jerry Doyle, M. Paul Lloyd, Sean Bratton, Tim Alexander Maunder, Damian Mullen, Michael Scott, Jen Wright, Dave the Troublemaker Fleming, Toby McEwen, Tim Cavalier, we're scanning down the bottom here, Scott Elsey. Scott Elsey says Bass Players Union, high five indeed, Scott. So thank you to everybody watching tonight. We do appreciate you giving up your valuable time to watch two middle-aged men from different sides of the pond yadder away for another 20 minutes here. Mike, I'll tell you something. This riffs on from something Spencer and I were talking about on the show, on the Sunday show we did. And I actually bought a book on Aurora because they were a kit company that were on the peripheries in the UK. They were mostly known in this country for the dinosaurs and some of the glow-in-the-dark monster kits.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't get that much else of the range in the UK. We did, but not to have that breakthrough success that the dinosaurs and the glow-in-the-dark kits got. Now, I started reading the book. It's absolutely fascinating, because the one thing I am getting out of this book at the moment is Aurora were brilliantly eclectic, but they never quite focused on one thing and excelling at it,
or a particular scale.
Yeah, and they just went from this to this to this to this to this to this, and this is my personal reading of it. So be prepared to I'm quite prepared to be told I'm wrong, but when they did a lot of things that were dependent on fads and crazes. And then once that kind of ran out, they were looking for the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And I think what happened, my reading of it was, by the time they got to the kind of the early part of the 1970s, and they went, do you know what? Perhaps we do need to concentrate on the basics, like the aircraft, the ships, tanks, cars, that core product. What have we got? Because they hadn't really kind of ever concentrated or invested in what they were doing, they ended up with a lot of stuff they were trying to bring to the market that was 10, 20 years behind the times.
Sure.
And about the only things that did manage to hold their own were the biplanes, because there was nothing else out there to compete with them, quite frankly. But we're going to come to this now, because I think you said you've got the kit. It's the Aurora A7 Corsair 2 in 48 scale. Now, I keep coming across things that say that the Monogram A7 was derived from the Aurora kit. The Aurora book I've got, brilliant book, by the way, says the same thing. I actually went online and had a look at photographs of both kits. The Aurora kit has very kind of matchboxy engraved recessed panel lines. The Monogram kit doesn't.
It has raised lines.
It has raised panel lines. There are apparently the Monogram kit is longer. The width of the canopy is different. The shape of the nose is different. And I'm thinking to myself, well, at what stage is this derived from the Aurora kit? At what stage is this actually a completely separate kit? I would love to know what the story is. But you said you've got both kits.
I do. They're in my storage unit. I have to get over there and get them. But yeah, they are. I can speak from memory that they are not. If there's similarities, it might be some of the basics, maybe the landing gear, maybe the wheels, things like that. But I know like the Aurora cockpit was almost like a toy, whereas Monograms actually not up to the the Century Series standards that they did with the F-101 and the F-105 and 106 and 102. Not up to that standard, because they came out with the A7 earlier, if I'm not mistaken. And if I'm also not mistaken, the Aurora kit's an A7A and the Monogram's an A7B. So there should be external differences too. I think most of the around that hump on the wing. But what I'll do, give me a few days, I'll go pull them out of my unit out there, and we'll do some measurements and some detail photos. And I'll send them over to you, and maybe we can put the controversy to rest.
I wonder whether or not it was the basis of it, but they just ended up making kind of like making another mold that just grew of its own accord. The interesting thing is I've got the very first detail and scale on the A7. And this is the detail and scale when they were literally like typed pages. So it's like, first generation home produced detail and scale. They don't mention that they are the same kit. They actually make a point of saying that the unlike the Aurora kit, the Monogram A7 is very nice, very detailed. It has all these fabulous features. So I think to myself, well, if surely detail and scale would have known if this was the Aurora kit, because that book is quite literally what is it? It's probably about early 1980s. So I think the Monogram kit would have almost been brand new when that came out.
Yeah. I think this is also the kind of the transition kit for Monogram, maybe that in the F-104, because I think they came out about the same time, where they kind of went away from the gimmicky stuff like the F4U Corsair, with the landing gear that would pop down, and the Wildcat that did the same thing and drop the bomb and all that. So I think this is kind of when Monogram sort of went towards that. We need to keep up with the Joneses out there, and started to really focus on making a more detailed, marketable kit. I could be wrong. I'm sure someone will correct me. Dave Fleming is probably furiously typing right now. I can be sarcastic too, Dave.
Have you ever met Dave?
No, unfortunately.
No, I cannot imagine Dave being furious about anything other than me grabbing his copy of my book and signing it in front of him. He was pretty furious then because it was actually worth something on resale, and then I completely devalued it anyway. No, it's a fascinating. It fascinates me because I like Dave actually mentions the thing about the Airfix 72nd scale Buccaneer S2 that was apparently based on their old NA39 kit. And again, there are superficial similarities, but there are so many different things that it's almost as if it's not like they actually got a mold and then went, right, we're now going to do this to it. We're now going to enlarge this section. We're going to do this.
Right.
We've got to do that. And the other thing you've got to remember with if you are modifying molds, is that it's easier to cut detail into it. It's difficult to actually build detail out of it.
Right.
So this is the reason why raised panel lines were always the norm for so long, because when it came to actually pantographing the mold, it was just easier to actually drill the line for the panel line because you were cutting into it. So if you cut into the mold, that's going to emerge as a raised part. But having said that, Monogram did in the early part of the 1990s, as part of this, when Pro Modeler was kicking off, they did actually take the old P51B kit and they re-engineered it to have recessed panel lines. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they took the mold. I think they did something whereby they might have taken the masters and then re-engineered it from that way. Monogram were always making duplicate molds of things, so you can end up with the same thing drifting off into different variations of the same mold. Frog did that with Hasegawa. Mm-hmm. Frog made duplicates of Hasegawa molds, and then when the arrangement finished with Hasegawa, Frog still had their copies, effectively their molds of the Hasegawa kits, which then ended up in Russia. Long story short. But it will be interesting to see your photographs to see, let's see what these differences are between these two kits, because it's really bugging me not to have a definitive answer. It's like, I need to know.
Well, didn't Monogram use, and back to the A7, I have no doubt that an Aurora A7 ended up on some Monogram engineer's desk.
Yeah.
And maybe the basis of the Monogram kit came from some of the shapes. Maybe the wing shape is the same. The fuselage is definitely different. The detail is different. But I could see where they would have borrowed some of the measurements. Didn't Monogram also use the Aurora F111?
F111, yeah. Apparently that as well. But again, you'd almost need to see a comparison of a set of sprues for the original Aurora kit, then see the Monogram kit to actually see the differences they've made. Yes, molds can be altered, but there is a difference between making minor alterations and something which, frankly, is a completely different kit.
Absolutely.
Growing up we're modelers. I think we don't grow up; we just grow older. But growing up in the States, what was your experience of Monogram as a child and a teenager making kits? Aurora Monogram.
Aurora, you know what? I don't think I've ever actually built an Aurora kit.
Really?
My first experience with, and I wouldn't say Aurora were terrible. They were very, like you said, they were almost a niche in their own niche. Mm. With the dinosaurs and the monsters and the Wolfman and all that. Actually, I lied. I built the Frankenstein.
Frankenstein monster. I just need to do that because people, the phone will be ringing. It'll be like that. I'll say, yeah, hello. Yes, I know it's not Frankenstein was the doctor.
Right.
It's the monster. He apologizes. All right, speak to you later, Mum. Bye.
Fine.
But yeah,
my mistake. I think my experience early on with kits that I think we're along the same level, but with the worst box art I've ever experienced was US Airfix.
Oh yes.
F86D, I believe, was my first, maybe my only US Airfix kit I ever built, and I'm not sure it made it to the end.
I'm actually just gonna do a US Airfix F86D.
I think
the best way of describing US, for those who have never seen this, and perhaps we'll do a gallery of US Airfix box arts, but the best way of describing them was lurid.
I think it was the F86.
No, actually. No, US Airfix didn't do the F86, ironically.
What was it?
It was probably something very, very similar.
It was a jet. I know that. I'm 52. I can't remember what I had for dinner 2 nights ago.
To be honest with you, the artists who did a lot of the artwork, it was a jet, was probably all they needed to know. They were like, what's that? It's a jet. Yeah, I got it. I don't need to know what it is, just a jet. That's fine, you know. Which is how you end up with Buccaneers landing on an aircraft carrier, shooting down Mitsubishi Zeros with 2 guys playing table tennis on the deck.
Right.
You know, it's actually quite interesting. It's quite telling that you said that you didn't have that much experience of Aurora, because again, this makes me think, as you said, they were a niche within a niche that they ended up driving up a kind of like a dead end of their own making.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's one of the things actually in the book that there was a perception that serious modelers didn't make Aurora kits because they were aimed at kids. They were the monsters. They were all these kind of, these kind of like sensationalist things. And it's quite telling that you said you didn't have that much experience of it, because that's almost echoing what's being said in the book, is that the serious modelers, they'd be buying monograms such as they were, but even then monogram were steps ahead in terms of what they were doing.
Right.
Early 1970s monogram aircraft kit is still going to be much better than the equivalent Aurora aircraft kit of the time. And obviously Revell, and you had other manufacturers that were around at the time. I think probably Hawk and Testers and people like that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's
Revell.
interesting. Yeah, and it's interesting that you said that, because and it'd be interesting to get other people's experiences of Aurora, because they're a very strange company. And when you see we talked about the monster scenes thing on the Sunday show. When you actually look at some of the kits that didn't make it into production, they are so grim. I'm not even going to mention them on this channel, because it's seriously, you think, what were they thinking?
Yeah, they went down a seriously strange road that they probably should have stayed off of. They picked the wrong fork in the road to drive down. Sure.
That's an understatement. So growing up, who were, you said US Airfix, who else were your big influences as a kid building models?
Are we talking model kit companies or people?
No, model kit companies. Who you go to the hobby store? Who were you always gravitating towards?
Well, initially, I think I started building on 78 or 79. I don't know. I was probably 8 or 9 years old. When I starting to get into model building, and honestly, it just taking a little trip back down memory lane, my whole interest actually started with my dad and my brother when we lived in Michigan. At our kitchen table, my dad used to work at Sears. I'll make this brief because I know you don't want to run too long.
No. We can overrun tonight, Mike. It's not a problem.
Okay. So my dad used to work at a store, a department store here called Sears, when we lived in Michigan, and he managed the paint department. Somehow he got in really good with the toy distributor, and Sears used to carry model kits.
Mm-hmm.
And about once a quarter, the distributor guy would give my dad these 2 or 3 huge boxes that he'd he couldn't continue to sell, or they were returned because they were opened. They couldn't sell them again. They're mostly complete, I think, or if the boxes had damage, he gave them to my dad. Like probably 200 model kits at a time every quarter. And at the time, I was too young. My dad built and still builds. He's, 87 years old. He still builds 125th semi-trucks. He's probably got 500 of them. But I would sit at the kitchen table and watch him and my brother, and then I would be the guy that would like start rolling my dad's truck on the table and all that. So early on, I was more of a voyeur, I guess, if you will, of watching my dad and my brother build these things. And I slowly got more passionate about it. And my brother builds cars. My dad builds the semi-trucks. I fell in love with airplanes and have never really looked back. And so when I started actually building models, the big influence was right there was Monogram. I think the Monogram B25, the P61, the Mustang, the Corsair were all huge influencers and got me building models. And then moving forward, because that's all we really had that was affordable at the time. Like you said, when you grew up, you didn't have a whole lot of money. We were my dad was a middle-class guy and the only one in the house with a job with 4 kids and my mom. So money didn't come easy. And when I finally got my first job legally at 15 years old, this is when I was really starting to get into the hobby and wanting to buy stuff. My dad got me a job at this garage door company he worked at as a warehouse helper, just moving garage door parts everywhere and loading trucks and unloading semis. So long story short, I was getting paid $5 an hour. I had my own checking account. And we figured out over that summer, I should have made like $3,500. I ended summer with probably $200 because at lunchtime every single day, the hobby shop was about 40 yards away. And that's when I discovered the wonderful world of Hasegawa. I think Hasegawa was probably my first foray into the more upper echelon priced kits. And then, it's just blossomed from there. And then Monogram armor, I kind of fell in love with that. Spencer's going to be doing some of the tribute stuff. So I don't know. Hasegawa, I think, was the main as a teenager, but Monogram for sure as a younger man. Monogram and Revell. I had stacks and stacks of these things, and a lot of them were from my dad when he did the Sears thing. He had enough forethought, at least, to keep some of the airplanes and give them to me later. But most of them he just threw away.
Well, I can tell a similar story to that because my late father, one of the companies that he used to visit on his rounds as a representative of a company he was working for, was this company in Haldane Place, London, called Airfix. You see, and my dad used to go in there and used to go there and do whatever he was selling to them, and got friendly with one of the sales managers there, I think, and the sales manager said, "Oh, anything you want, you want any kits, just let us know. You want anything or whatever. You got a son, haven't you?" And my dad says, "Yes." And he says, "Yeah, you want any kits for your son? Just take them or whatever." For comic effect, it's better if I do my father as Michael Caine, because my father turned around and he went, "Oh no, that's all right. My son, he's far too young to be making models." And I'm just like, and when he told me that at a later date in life, I was just like,
what?
You could have had anything you wanted, especially as money was short. They were giving us free kits, and your response was, "Oh no, he's far too young to be making models." It's just like,
oh, I can only imagine. And I actually forgot a couple. Eschi. was another big influence.
Yeah.
And at one point, Nishimo.
Yeah, well, Spencer and I differ on that. He pronounces it Nikimo. I always pronounce it Nichimo. But
And I just said it completely different than both of you.
That's perfectly fine. I'm going to consult a Japanese friend of mine for the proper pronunciation, and then carry on doing it the way I've always done it. So,
the one thing that we did not get here when I was a kid were proper UK-made Airfix kits. I never saw them on the shelves. So once in a while, one of the stores would have what the old kind of the white box that had the round Airfix logo in the corner. But yeah, Heller was another one because they were cheap.
I'll tell you what, they weren't in the UK when the first Heller kits started. But again, Heller actually ended up finding a good US distributor. Ironically, I think it was Aurora. I think Eschi and Heller actually got a deal with, got on board with Aurora. It's mentioned in the book anyway. But the thing is, when the first Heller kits really started appearing in it was a chain of stores in the UK called Beatties. It was like a model supermarket.
Sure.
I always remember going in and thinking, oh, Heller, that's 3 times the price of an Airfix Spitfire. A Heller 72nd scale Spitfire Mark V, 2 times the price of an Airfix Spitfire Mark V.
Wow.
Still bought one because I thought, wow, this has got detail. It's got a rudder pedals and things. But the weird thing is that in the UK, monogram weren't something that you found easily or cheaply. And I can always remember here in the town I live in, we had a shop called Sport Toy, and they actually had a limited selection of monogram kits. But again, they were about 3-4 times the price of an Airfix or Matchbox one. So what was my incentive to go out and buy a monogram kit? 0, because I couldn't afford them. And it was only come about round about the kind of like the early part of the 80s that suddenly Heller and Monogram, and all these, they started to become a bit more available. But it's weird. It is almost a kind of like it's a reverse situation, and as much as that in the US, kind of like Airfix kits were, if they weren't coming through the importers, they were as rare as hen's teeth. Sure. And it was similar, in the UK, that Monogram, they were around, but you couldn't go, oh, darling, I'm just popping out to buy a Monogram kit. As much as you could pop out and buy an Airfix or a Matchbox or a Frog or Revell.
Right.
Easy. But to get a Monogram kit, tricky.
Yeah, and it's sadly, I think it's going that way again, due to certain political situations and postage and all that. But we won't get into that. I feel terrible. And if I could take a moment just to let everybody know, I am not stopping shipping to the UK.
Right.
FYI, I do have to charge the 20% VAT, which I hate, but you know what? I'll pay it and be done with it. The UK buys a lot of stuff from me, and I appreciate the business. So, if I have to take a little kick in the teeth once in a while to do it, I'll do it. So, on a lighter note,
it's just checks to the gallery here. They're all like this. It's like, no, I'm like, right, I'm not going to mention it. Don't worry. Yeah, yeah.
So I see you've tried the little airbrush, the new little 27-pounder.
Yes. I went back and had a word with Martin Kovac. Martin Kovac does Night Shift Modeler on YouTube, which is the best modeling channel out there. It's brilliant. He went from kind of like about 6,000 subscribers to over 100,000 in the space of a year.
Wow.
Because he's good, because he is very good, and he's very funny, and there's no ego with him. He's very open, he's friendly, he laughs at his own mistakes, he's genuinely curious. You see, he doesn't state things as absolute facts. He will question the things that he says. But anyway, long story short, I actually spoke to him this week. I said, Martin, can you remember what was the video where you first mentioned that Fender airbrush? And he went, I think it was the Ag Tiger. Went back and watched it last night. Yes, it was. It was the Ag Tiger video that he did. But yeah, my little Fender airbrush, so good, I might go out and buy another one. For the simple reason that it's going to sound ever so profligate here now. I like to have an airbrush that I'll use purely for lacquers, and I like to have another one that I'll use purely for water-based acrylics. I don't like putting different materials through the same airbrush.
Right.
So I'd like to get another one that I'm purely using to shoot water-based acrylics like Vallejo, like the varnishes, and things like that, so that I know what to put through it to clean it and whatever. But it still is not disappointing me.
Good. I was really impressed by that. I can't remember what it is, that tank that you did.
Oh, the elephant, yeah.
Yeah, the elephant. I'm terrible.
Ferdinand, rather, yeah.
I watched the initial live thing that you did where you were like, I'm still working on getting it dialed in. But then when you went back and you finished it and you tightened up a couple things, the knowing that it's that big.
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
That's impressive.
Well, it's very kind of you. I mean, there's like a gazillion one mistakes on it, as always. The first thing you always see are the things that you didn't get right, or you think, if only I'd stopped at that stage. If only I hadn't kind of like carried on working on it. And this is the thing I actually enjoy about this hobby, Mike, is that I'm still learning. Martin Kovac has just been a revolution when it comes to me building armor. Is everything that I thought I knew in terms of technique, I've thrown out the window, because the way he builds models, slavishly copying him. I'm not going to make any bones about it. I said to him the other day, thanks for that, Martin. I look forward to stealing more of your ideas in the future.
Right.
But the way he does things, and it's like, that's brilliant. What am I doing? Yeah, the little elephant, Ferdinand, rather. And just to well, thank you. Just to explain, I always think that the trick with doing this camouflage is that you put it down, but you have got to then knock it back with like a filter or a glaze of the base color to get that kind of contrast and the actual color down to to fade it, really knock it back. But yeah, that was airbrushed, admittedly in a hurry, because I didn't have my eye in. I was making mistakes left, right, and center. But that was airbrushed with that 28 pounds Fender airbrush, and that's a simple, cheap, snap together Zvezda 72nd scale Ferdinand. As always, you get to the end of a project and you suddenly realize, I know what I could have done differently next time round. But it's a beautiful little airbrush. It's gonna get another one. Just because I want to see what I can do with one using different materials.
Sure.
But actually, it's a question I'm going to ask you, Mike. Is that what I've seen some of the stuff you build, which is fabulous. What is your preferred paint these days that you're kind of like shooting through an airbrush?
Oh, it's always going to be Mr. Color.
Right.
And the Tamiya. I have yet to even touch any of the Tamiya LP paints because they're not here yet. I'm pretty flexible though. But for my go-to, it's usually going to be Mr. Color if they have it. Mm-hmm. And we found out. I mean, we looked at that 36-270 that I painted, that F16 that I'm working on with overall, and then I used the Mr. Paint, which I have 2 bottles of, which both shot the exact same, way too dark, and they came from 2 different sources. So
I remember that controversy.
So that said, I do really like Mr. Paint too. My only issue with it is I'm very impatient when it comes to painting, because number one, my lack of bench time really kind of puts me in that situation where I want to feel like I've got something done. Mr. Paint, I love it. I just don't like having to, paint the same subject 44 times before I have coverage. because it's so thin, but really good paint. I've always loved the Tamiya, acrylics, just because of their flexibility, and they're so easy to clean. You screw something up, out comes the old Windex, wipe it off, start over. And it's kind of the same thing when I mess up something with the Gunzy Mr. Color. I've discovered Tamiya lacquer thinner is a great paint stripper and does not damage the plastic.
Ah, funny you say that, because I've got some of the Tamiya lacquer thinner, and I was using it to remove Mr. Surfacer. And I actually found it did actually start to bite into the plastic.
Really?
It did. It did. So I use Mr. Color thinner now.
Okay.
But I was finding it was, because I've got both types. I've got the standard Tamiya lacquer thinner, and I've got the slow retarder one as well. But yeah, they will start to bite into the plastic.
So you were using the standard one?
I can't remember which one I was using.
Okay. I'll send you a picture of the one that I use.
Yeah. Okay.
If it's a different bottling.
What I'll do is I've got some scrap bits of plastic here. I'll get a cotton bud on each of one and see what just try and recreate the experiment. But the Tamiya lacquers are beautiful.
Yeah, I can't wait till they're here.
Yeah. I thought Andy down the road was stocking them.
Not yet. He can't get them.
Okay.
He's although he is starting to get Gunzy, but the Aqueous, which I'm like, no, man, go back. You got to get Mr. Color.
Well, the Guns Aqueous stuff works. I find I don't have a problem with that, because that's pretty much just like Tamiya acrylic.
Right.
You can still thin it with the Mr. Color thinner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just I find Tamiya acrylics, Gunzy Aqueous, Tamiya lacquers, Mr. Color lacquers, all of them, I just always thin them with Mr. Color, either Tamiya lacquer thinner or Mr. Color lacquer thinner.
I'm the same way for everything except for the Aqueous, because I've never really used it, to be honest.
Okay. It is a hot acrylic, in as much as if you brushed on a coat and then tried brushing another coat, it will want to start digging in and biting and lifting. Whereas if you were to do that with, say, Vallejo, there's no aggressive solvent in there. So if you brush one over, you can brush, just carry on. I tell another brand of paint to keep a lookout for if it arrives in the States, and that's the Scale Modeler's Supply. That's
what you used on that Ferdinand.
I used the green. And it airbrushes beautifully. Some of their colors, I have slight reservations over their interpretation of some colors.
Right.
But, and again, I'm going to ask Drew about this and see what his consensus is. I'd rather have a paint that sprays well, that I just have to adjust the color, rather than a paint that is, this paint is super accurate. Can I spray it? Oh no, God no. And it's like, oh great, felt a lot of good that is. No point having a super accurate paint. You put it in the airbrush, you thin it, you go, and we're off, and we're going to have to empty it and clean the airbrush out again,
Right.
So, I'd rather do the adjustments there. But the Scale Modeler's Supply, I've got.
I'll see if I can find some.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to Mr. Paint, but its coverage is so much better.
Okay, I'll try it.
Really
and it's similar kind of composition as well.
It's an acrylic lacquer. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that for me, horses for courses, right? I think the acrylic lacquers for me are the way to go. Personally, they're just what I have the most luck with. They're easy to clean. They're easy to clean airbrush. It's just a really, and it's a forgiving paint, which I've discovered.
Yeah.
Other people love mission models paint.
I couldn't get on with it.
I can't get on. I don't want to play junior chemist every time I mix paint. But other people love it, and more power to them if they do. I don't want to see any company go out of business that's in this hobby, because unless they deserve to. The guy's out there, working hard and doing his formula, and people really dig it. I can't get it to work.
I think a lot of it is down to muscle memory. You see, I am so used to when I'm airbrushing that I'm so used to using, Tamiya Tamiya lacquers, guns, Mr. Color. Shall we? I hate to use kind of like a layman's term, because somebody always comes up with the snark and says, "Oh, that's not what it is." And it's like, right, okay. I call them kind of like solvent-based acrylics and lacquers. You see, I can spray if I'm a bit heavy-handed with them, they're forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
You see, whereas with something like Vallejo, which is purely like a water-based one, if I'm heavy-handed with it, it'll pull and it'll run. And it's sometimes there are certain Vallejo, some of the primers that I use, they're not primers, they're just undercoats. Their olive drab is a beautiful color. It's my favorite color for doing olive drab for things to then build other layers on top.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to remember to spray it completely different.
Yeah,
I have to do it in a completely different thing. And I tried some of the Mission Models paints, and I couldn't get my head around them. I really couldn't. And
same here.
Funny thing is, Martin Kovac, my Uncle Night Shift, he's the same. Tried doing the Yag Tiger with them, couldn't get on with them. I've seen other people who use them, and they say they're the best paints ever. And it's like, well, there is room in this hobby for everybody to have their favorite paint and their favorite way of doing things. There is no, this is the only way you do it. It's like, no, there is plenty of room. If somebody likes a certain paint, then good luck to them. That's their workshop. It's their money. It's their time. I'm not going to tell them that's a terrible paint because I can't use it. Right. Because the truth could be it's a very good paint, and I'm a terrible modeler because I can't use it. So
yeah. People think I'm crazy because I every time I open a bottle of Gunzy, I fill it to the top with lacquer thinner. Shut the lid. It's pre-mixed now because I'm comfortable with that consistency when I spray. Yeah. Now, when I do spray, will I add a little bit here and there? Sure. But yeah, just from experience, I fill that thing all the way up with the lacquer thinner.
Yeah. No, I also find if back in the old days of enamel paints, remember enamel paints? That if you pre-thinned enamel paint and kept it in a bottle, it then used to kind of turn into an oil slick and a sandy beach. That was it. No matter what you did, shake it. Once,
stir it.
Yeah, it would never go back to how it was. You see, whereas with anything that you're kind of like thinning with lacquer thinner, you could top up that bottle with lacquer thinner. Come back 10 years later, and it's still good to go.
Yep.
That's what I like about the lacquer paints. Tim Campbell says. He says, I've yet to try Mr. Paint, but we'll give it a try. I like the idea of being able to layer. I like to experiment. I think, as Mike says, you certainly will be layering.
Yeah.
And this is a good one. Steve Moores says, Hataka. I've got some of their paints, Steve.
Me too.
Still yet to use them.
Wow. I'll say this. Sorry, didn't mean to step on you. Go ahead, John.
No, carry
on. Same with Zero paints. For car models, I've sprayed some on a kit that I'm working on for my son, and they're beautiful. But again, it's different muscle memory when it comes to thinning and how to go about it. But yeah, Hataka, I've yet to use those either.
I've got some of the Hataka colors for British Fleet Air Arm, because there aren't that many accurate kind of versions of extra dark sea grey and dark slay grey out there in these kinds of paints. So I got them because I thought, right, I'm going to build something, Fleet Air Arm to try them out in. Still yet to get around to doing that. But when I was in Frome just before Christmas, and they were, they had the stack there of the SMS paints, and I was looking at them thinking, this is great. Look at all these colours here. Look. Royal Australian Air Force colours, sky blue, foliage green, earth brown. I've got to build something RAF now. And I've since then I've been sat there thinking, what can I build? I want to try these paints out. What can I build? What's out there that I can do this? So it's weird how, to me, because I'm such an experimental modeler, is sometimes I can buy a bottle of paint and think, yeah, right, I like this. What can I build to actually use this paint on? And it's quite interesting talking to Spencer. We talked about this on the Sunday. Was that he very much is. I've got these paints. I'll stick with them. I am an absolute sucker for trying paints out all the time.
Me too. We all remember the AK Interactive controversy about a certain publication. I kind of swore them off, but then I tried their paints, and they're brilliant. And Andy carries them, and now I've probably got 60 bottles of them, because they spray very much like Gunsy, Tamiya. Same process of thinning for me, and I like their color range.
Yeah. Oh, I've got, see, somebody's throwing a challenge down here now. Oh, not that one. Bruce's scale models say, especially seeing as it's a centenary of the R88F this year.
Oh,
it is.
The gauntlet has been thrown.
Well, do you know what? I've actually got to build an Airfix Tiger Moth, and I want to build the little 72nd scale one. The most recent boxing is an Australian one. And I know that because I did the decals for it.
Yeah, I would hope you know that.
Do you know what? You say that, and yet I came across some artwork the other day, and I thought, oh, I never realised I'd drawn that. I never realised I've actually drawn that subject. And I was like, it's honestly, it's not the legs that go first, Mike.
Oh, I know. Oh, believe me.
Actually, Rob Monfils, he was right. Rob Monfils says Airfix Spitfire 5C, the new little kit. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to find something. I will find something. And I know I've got. When I was in the workshop the other day, and I suddenly thought, oh, actually, I've got a couple of those little Hobby Boss, those little snap together kits that they do. The Focke-Wulf 190A and the Heinkel 162. They're all covered in primer, and the Messerschmitt Comet. I built another Messerschmitt Comet. They're all covered in primer. So I thought, well, actually, perhaps I should get some of the SMS Luftwaffe paints and give them a go. But it's more the kind of the colours that aren't readily available, like the RAF ones, the Australian ones. They're the ones I really want to try out. So, but yeah, just going through the comments here. Pavel says, Hataka Orange Line lacquers are great, although they require primers as they are not as robust as other lacquers. Other Hataka lines, brackets, acrylics, not a fan. Well, actually, you see, that's where I had some box sets of acrylic color. I can't remember who they were, whether they were Vallejo. They were Vallejo and they were AK. I tried some of them. I think I gave them all to Tim Maunder in the end because I just didn't get on with them. But it's weird. I found this with Vallejo is that some of the colors will spray like a dream, and you think, oh well, this is great. I'll invest in an entire range of them. And then you start trying to spray colors like yellow or silvers, and they are just airbrush cloggers. So there definitely is something to do with the certain colors. The pigments are ground thicker, a bit finer. Yeah. And others are so they're like I say, they do an olive drab primer. It's beautiful. It's such a lovely paint. It sprays from the bottle perfectly, and it dries, and it's fabulous. But then some of the other ones, you're just like, and we're off, and we've got to stop and clean the airbrush again. It's like, it's not with it. You don't get that with the Tamiya. You don't get that with the lacquers, with Mr. Color, anything, any of these lacquer-based acrylic paints or lacquer paints. You don't get it. They just spray, and I think that's because the solvent is that aggressive that it's just like, out of my way, boom. It's
I'm coming through. Yeah,
I'm coming through. Yeah, exactly. It's literally kind of like less a thinner, more an airbrush enema. But
and I would say, the one thing this is going to sound really stupid. I like the Tamiya, the Gunsy, and all that because, frankly, the smell is not off-putting to me. Whereas an old Model Master enamel. Gosh, I have to, air out my garage for 3 days to get, the smell out of there.
That's the one thing I did notice with these SMS paints is that even if I was doing something like that Ferdinand, because I'm not generating huge clouds of spray, I'll just crank a window open and the pressure's low. You're not breathing in vapors. You're just getting the smell of it.
Right.
But they do have a rather strong smell. When it comes to actually doing larger areas, no, that's in the spray booth. I do that if I'm doing large painting, mask on, spray booth, do it that way. If I'm doing smaller things like mottling or camouflage or things like that, generally you can do it. You're
Just
not
at
like
the
saying
bench.
it, but if the smell is a little bit too pungent, then I will put the mask on again. But yeah, it's funny you say that, because I can still smell Airfix enamels that came in the bottle. It's just, there is something about that. I only have to look at a photograph of a bottle, and it's like I know what that smells like. It's it's ingrained in the memory.
Right.
I'm just thinking if we've got any more comments here. Just having a quick whiz through. Rob Monfils says the SMS scale blue is sky blue is a bit pale though. Okay, I'll bear that in mind. But I think everybody's been very good tonight. I think we have run out of time, Mike, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm running out of battery. But I can, one last point. The absolute worst paint I've ever used is a British paint, extra acrylics.
Never used them.
Oh, I'm glad you did. I don't even think they make them anymore, do they?
I think they do, but I have absolutely zero interest in using them. I used to get on with Aeromaster acrylics. I quite like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they weren't bad.
They were quite nice. I tried spraying Life Color, but I found that they just beaded up and remain wet too long. They're probably better for, again, it's all technique. It's the wrong technique, but we could talk about this for hours if we could. Certainly. Welcome to tonight's 3-hour podcast, in which we just go through names of paint and say, have you used that? Yes, no, But Mike, I'm afraid we are out of time.
No worries.
Actually, Chris Alung, sorry, Chris, got your name wrong there. He actually says, no, the worst paint was CompuColor, never dried. Yep.
I never even heard of that.
Well, right, I'll tell you about another time. There was the people in this country remember there was a company called CompuColor, and then there was a bit of a disagreement, and then somebody else set up CompuColor 2, and then the name got lost in this legal argument, and I think out of that was actually born Extra Color. But don't quote me on that. I'm not going to. I'm in enough trouble tonight with your Frankenstein faux pas. So,
well, before you let me go, you have your little bell, which I think is cute.
In the office,
I'm gonna top one.
Oh, ring for beer. That sounds like an excellent suggestion, Mike. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. It is, as ever, an absolute joy to speak and see you. I feel as though you are. Same here. I feel as though you were just around the corner from me, but the fact that I'm sat here shivering in my Foo Fighters t-shirt in Somerset, in the basking heat of a Arizonan winter. As ever, Mike, it's a pleasure. We will have you on again in a heartbeat. And you're always welcome to come on. And anytime you got anything new, just give us a shout, and you're welcome to come on. Just to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in tonight.
Absolutely,
it's very kind of you. I mean, it's we don't ask you to do this. We'd like you to join us, but we don't ask you to join us. Beyond that, hopefully we'll be back on Sunday with Mr. Pollard, and we'll be looking at some of the new things that are coming out this week or have been announced this week. As ever, just remains for us to say thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please, be good, kind, conscientious citizens. And we'll see you on Sunday. So for Mike and myself, thank you for watching. Good night.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks for having me.